When I was 9, my bedroom was at the very end of a long hallway. It was the smallest room in the house, technically meant to be an office, but my parents gave it to me because I liked being tucked away from everything. At the time, I thought it made me feel grown up. Looking back, I think I just liked the quiet. There was one thing about that room that always bothered me though. The closet. It wasn't a normal sliding door closet. It had a full wooden door with a brass knob and a deep frame, like it had once connected to another room before the house was remodeled. The inside was unusually large too. Instead of a simple rack and shelf, it extended back farther than it should have, almost like a narrow second room hidden behind hanging clothes. I don't know why that detail stuck with me so much. Plenty of houses have odd layouts. But even during the day, I didn't like standing inside that closet for long. The light fixture in there was dim and buzzed faintly. And because the ceiling slanted downward toward the back wall, the farthest corner was always shadowed, no matter how many times I changed the bulb. It wasn't dramatic fear. I wasn't screaming or refusing to sleep in my room. It was just a quiet discomfort. The sense that the space didn't quite match the rest of the house. At night, my hallway was pitch black. My parents kept their door closed, and once the lights were off, the only illumination in my room came from the digital clock on my dresser. If I left my closet door open, it created a darker rectangle within the darkness. I started closing it every night before bed, carefully turning the knob until it clicked. I don't remember when the first small thing happened. I just remember noticing it one morning before school. The closet door was open, not wide open, just a few inches, enough that I could see the faint outline of hanging clothes from my bed. I assumed I had forgotten to shut it all the way. I was a kid. I probably rushed. So that night, I made a point of checking it. I stood there, turned the knob, pulled the door tight, and listened for the click. Then I even tugged on it to make sure it was secure. The next morning, it was open again. A little wider this time. I remember standing in my pajamas, staring at it, trying to replay the previous night in my head. Had I gotten up to use the bathroom? Had I gone into the closet for something and forgotten? It felt silly to be bothered by something so small. Doors shift. Houses settle. Air pressure changes. I'd heard adults say that kind of thing before. So I closed it again and didn't mention it to anyone. Over the next couple of weeks, it kept happening. Not every night, just often enough that I started checking first thing every morning. Sometimes it would only be cracked. Sometimes it would be open wide enough that I could see all the way to the back wall. That's when I started noticing something else. There were a few mornings where the clothes on the rack looked shifted, like they'd been pushed slightly to one side. It was subtle, the kind of thing you'd only notice if you stared at it every day, which, by then, I was. I finally told my mom. She barely looked up from the sink while I explained it. She said older houses expand and contract. She said I probably wasn't latching it properly. She even suggested I might be opening it in my sleep. That part stuck with me. I had never sleepwalked before, but she said kids do weird things at night and don't remember. The explanation made sense. More sense than anything else. For a while, I tried to accept that. But then something happened that I couldn't quite file under house settling. I started finding small things out of place in my room. A book that I always kept on my nightstand would be on the floor. My desk chair would be angled differently. Once, my backpack was sitting in front of the closet door instead of beside my dresser. None of it was dramatic. Nothing broken. Nothing missing. Just wrong. I tested the sleepwalking theory. One night, I wedged my desk chair under the closet doorknob before going to bed. Not in a way that would trap me, just enough that if the door opened, it would push the chair loudly. I remember lying awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling, feeling embarrassed for even trying something like that. When I woke up the next morning, the chair was moved aside. The closet door was open, wide. I didn't remember hearing anything in the night. That's when the fear changed from mild discomfort to something heavier. Don't panic. Just this constant awareness that something wasn't right. I stopped sleeping deeply after that. I'd wake up multiple times a night and check the door from my bed. Sometimes it would still be closed. Sometimes it would already be open, and I couldn't tell how long it had been that way. I became hyper-aware of sounds. The hum of the vent, the faint ticking of the clock, the occasional creak from the hallway. And then came the night I woke up standing. At first, I thought I was dreaming. I was upright, facing darkness, and my brain felt foggy. It took several seconds to register that my feet were on the carpet. I wasn't in my bed. I was inside the closet. The door was shut behind me. The air in there felt heavier than usual, warmer. I could smell dust and fabric and that faint electrical scent from the buzzing light fixture, though the light was off. For a moment, I genuinely couldn't move. My arms were at my sides. My face was inches from hanging clothes. I could feel the soft brush of fabric against my cheek. I tried to piece it together. Had I sleepwalked there? Had I closed the door myself? My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I reached back slowly and turned the knob. The door opened without resistance. My room was dark and silent. The clock read 3:17 a.m. I stepped out and stood there, just breathing. And then, before I could fully calm down, I heard it. A soft shifting sound behind me. Not loud, not dramatic, just the subtle rustle of clothes brushing together, as if someone had moved their hand through them. I froze. Every rational thought I had told me it was gravity, fabric settling, air displacement from me moving. But I hadn't touched the clothes, and the sound came from deeper inside the closet, from the far corner where the ceiling slanted down and shadows pooled even during the day. I didn't turn around. I don't know why. I just couldn't. I stepped fully into my room and pulled the door shut. Slowly, quietly. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I told my parents everything. Sleepwalking. Waking up inside the closet. The sound. My dad checked the hinges. He tightened the screws. He suggested installing a latch higher up where I couldn't reach it in my sleep. My mom said night terrors can make things feel more real than they are. They weren't dismissive exactly, just practical. That weekend, my dad installed a hook-and-eye latch on the outside of the closet door, the kind that could only be secured from my room. After that, the door never opened on its own again. I never woke up inside it again. And eventually, I started sleeping normally. We moved out of that house 2 years later. I didn't think about it much after that. I grew up. I went to college, got an apartment, but every so often, I'll wake up in the middle of the night and feel that same sensation for half a second. That disoriented awareness of standing somewhere I shouldn't be. I know sleepwalking can escalate suddenly. I know kids can do complex things without remembering. I've read about it since then. It's entirely possible that I walked into that closet and shut the door myself. It's even possible the rustling sound was just clothes settling. What I've never been able to explain, though, is how I was positioned. When I woke up in that closet, I wasn't facing the door. I was facing the back corner. I was standing as close to it as physically possible, like I'd been looking at something, or like something had been standing there with me. This happened when I was 15, maybe 16. I always say 15, because that feels right, but I can't remember the exact year. We were living in a 2-story house my parents had bought from an older couple who were downsizing. It wasn't historic or anything, just a regular suburban house built in the late 70s. Beige siding, creaky stairs, the kind of place where every room looked slightly outdated no matter how much you cleaned it. The attic wasn't anything special either. It wasn't finished, just exposed beams, insulation, and plywood flooring laid down in certain sections so you could store things. We only went up there a couple times a year. Christmas decorations, old clothes, boxes of school projects my mom refused to throw out. That kind of stuff. I didn't think about the attic much. The reason I ended up there that day was completely ordinary. My mom had asked me to grab a small space heater we used in the winter. It had warmed up unexpectedly in early spring, and she wanted it stored away. I remember she was on the phone in the kitchen while she asked me, half distracted, and I said yeah, without really listening to where exactly she'd put it. I didn't want to interrupt her call to ask again. That was pretty typical teenage logic. So I went upstairs, pulled down the attic ladder, and climbed up. It was mid-afternoon. Plenty of daylight coming through the little circular vent on the far wall. The bulb overhead worked, but it was dim and yellow. I figured the heater would be near the front, somewhere obvious. It wasn't. I started shifting boxes around, trying to be careful, but mostly just creating a bigger mess. After about 10 minutes, I gave up on looking for something specific and started opening random containers that seemed likely. That's when I noticed something I didn't recognize. Near the far end of the attic, against the back wall, there was a narrow wooden panel I was almost positive hadn't been visible before. It wasn't flush with the wall like everything else. It looked slightly newer than the surrounding plywood, like it had been replaced at some point. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't scream the hidden door. It just didn't match. If I hadn't been moving boxes around, I probably wouldn't have seen it. I remember kneeling down and pressing on it. It gave a little under my hand. Not loose exactly, but not fully secured either. There was a small metal ring screwed into the center, like a pull handle. I hesitated for a second, mostly because I didn't want to deal with whatever extra storage space might be behind it. But curiosity won. I pulled. The panel swung inward about a foot before catching on something. Behind it was a narrow compartment, maybe 3 feet deep, running between the studs. Not big enough to stand in. More like a crawl space within the attic itself. Inside were several spiral notebooks stacked neatly on top of each other. That was it. No dust-covered antiques. No strange objects. Just notebooks. I actually remember feeling relieved. It felt harmless. Probably something the previous owners had forgotten. I pulled one out and sat back on the plywood floor to flip through it. The first few pages were normal enough. Grocery lists. Budget calculations. Notes about replacing a water heater. Random reminders. The handwriting was neat, small, consistent. There was no name on the cover. I flipped forward. After maybe 20 pages, the tone shifted slightly. The writing became more observational. Notes about sounds in the house. 213A, M, tapping from above bedroom. 440A, M, faint vibration in walls. It didn't read like paranoia at first, more like someone trying to track down a draft or a plumbing issue. Then the measurements started. Whole pages dedicated to dimensions. Attic length, 27 feet, 4 inches. Width, 18 feet, 9 inches. Distance between support beams. Calculations comparing interior space to the house's exterior footprint. Some numbers were circled repeatedly. In the margins, they had written, "Doesn't add up." The handwriting got tighter as I kept reading. More cramped. Less careful. There were hand-drawn diagrams of the attic. Shaded sections. One wall labeled multiple times. The same wall I was sitting against. I remember becoming aware of that in a very slow way. The notes grew repetitive, remeasured. Still short by approx. 2 feet 8 inches. Impossible, unless the interior wall is thicker than standard. No visible modification. Then came timestamps again, but these weren't about sounds in the house anymore. 112A, M, scratching inside the wall. 117A, M, stopped. 119A, M, resumed. The writing pressed harder into the paper. You could see indentations from previous pages. A few entries later, tested theory. Sound reacts to pressure. There were small tally marks drawn in the margins. Groups of 5. Page after page of them. The earlier grocery lists felt like they belonged to someone else entirely. I pulled out the second notebook. It picked up exactly where the first left off. More measurements, more diagrams, the same wall circled over and over. At one point, the writer had drawn a cross-section of the attic, showing an empty gap behind the wall I was leaning on. They had written, "Access points must exist." There were new details now. 303A. M. Breathing sound? That word was underlined 3 times. Not pipes. Rhythm irregular. The handwriting began slanting upward across the page, like they were running out of space but didn't want to turn to the next sheet yet. At some point, I became aware that I was completely alone in the house. My mom had left to run errands. I hadn't even noticed her car pulling out. I told myself the notes were probably from someone who had some kind of breakdown. Maybe the previous owner, maybe someone older, but there was something that didn't sit right. The writer referenced changes in the house layout, minor renovations that, as far as I knew, had happened after my parents moved in, like the hallway light fixture being replaced, or the guest bathroom tile. Unless my parents had unknowingly repeated the exact same updates years later, that meant whoever wrote this had been there more recently than I'd assumed. I looked at the date written on one page. There wasn't one. None of the pages were dated. That felt deliberate. I read until the entries stopped forming sentences altogether. The final pages were just tallies, rows and rows of them. I flipped to the very last sheet. There was one sentence, written lightly compared to the others. Confirmed internal volume discrepancy. And that was it. I don't know how long I sat there after that. Probably longer than I realized. Eventually, I stood up and pressed my palm against the wall they'd fixated on. It felt solid. I knocked on it. The sound was dull and consistent. I knocked again, closer to the center. The pitch shifted slightly. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't hollow in a movie way. But it was different. I grabbed a tape measure from a nearby toolbox and measured the attic width myself. Then I went downstairs and measured the exterior wall from the backyard. There was a difference, small, under 3 feet, but real. That was the moment it stopped being just someone else's paranoia. I didn't panic. I just felt cold. When my mom came home, I didn't tell her everything. I just said I thought there might be some kind of unused crawl space behind one of the attic walls. She looked confused, but followed me up anyway. She's not the type to overreact. She's practical. I showed her the notebooks first. She read a few pages quietly. Her expression didn't change much, but she stopped halfway through the second book. "These aren't that old," she said. That's when I noticed something I hadn't before. The brand logo on the notebook. It was a design I recognized from my own school supplies. Something you'd buy at a chain store that hadn't existed in our town until recently. My mom walked over to the wall and knocked on it herself. She didn't say anything for a while. Then she went downstairs and called my dad. When he got home, he didn't waste time speculating. He grabbed a stud finder, then a small pry bar. He wasn't angry, just focused. "If there's a gap, we should know," he said. I stood off to the side while he worked at the seam where the panel met the frame. It took longer than I expected. The nails were driven in deep. When the section finally loosened, it didn't collapse or reveal anything dramatic. It just shifted outward enough for us to see behind it. There was a space, about 2.5 feet deep, running the length of the wall, insulated on the far side, framed properly, not some makeshift addition. But what caught my attention wasn't the empty space itself. It was the inside surface of the wall panel we had just removed. The interior side, the part no one was supposed to see, was covered in markings. Not random scratches, not graffiti. Carefully drawn lines, grids, measurements written in pencil. Small, precise tick marks along the studs. Some of them matched the diagrams in the notebooks exactly. Even the spacing between the marks aligned with the measurements I'd read. My dad went very quiet. "There's no other way in here," he said eventually. And he was right. The gap was fully enclosed. No hatch from another room. No access from the outside. Just insulation and framing. The only opening was the one we had just made, which meant someone had either drawn those markings before the panel was installed or after. But if after, how? The notebooks described someone pressing against that exact wall, reacting to sounds from inside the space. They described measurements that matched what we were seeing now, but the panel had been nailed in place for years. The nails showed no signs of being removed. We triple-checked. There was nothing else in the space. No hidden door, no belongings, no sign that anyone had physically been inside it. Just the markings. My dad reattached the panel that same night. He didn't throw away the notebooks. He boxed them up and stored them in his office closet. We never reported anything. There wasn't anything to report. No crime, no damage, no missing person. Just a space in the attic that was slightly smaller than it should have been. We moved out 3 years later for unrelated reasons. I asked my dad once what he thought had happened. He said maybe the previous owner had removed the panel at some point, done whatever measuring they were obsessed with, and sealed it back up carefully. But that doesn't explain the interior markings, or how the measurements in the notebooks matched them so precisely. And it definitely doesn't explain one small detail I didn't mention to him at the time. On the very last page of the final notebook, beneath the sentence about confirming the volume discrepancy, there was a faint indentation, like someone had started to write something else and then erased it. I held the page up to the light before putting it back. You could just barely make out the impression. It wasn't a sentence, it was a number, the exact square footage of my bedroom. I've never really thought of myself as the kind of person who scares easily. I live alone, I prefer it that way, and I've always been pretty good at talking myself through things that even bump in the night. Houses make noise. Old plumbing knocks. Wind finds places it shouldn't. There's usually an explanation if you're patient enough to look for it. I'm 42, divorced, and have no kids. About 5 years ago, when my mom passed and my dad decided he couldn't handle the winters anymore, he moved down south and signed the house over to me. I'd been renting a small apartment at the time, and moving back into my childhood home felt strange at first. Like wearing an old jacket that still fits but doesn't quite feel like yours anymore. The house is big for one person. Bigger than I need, honestly. 3 bedrooms, 2 floors, plus an unfinished attic. I only use the first floor regularly. The rest of the house mostly stays dark at night. I work from home now, freelance graphic design. My routine is simple. Coffee in the morning, headphones most of the day, and around 10:30 or 11 page. I make a cup of tea and walk through the house locking doors and checking windows. I've done it every night since I moved in. It's not paranoia, it's just a habit, a small ritual that makes the house feel settled before I go upstairs to bed. The attic has never been part of that routine. It's accessed by one of those pull-down ladders in the upstairs hallway ceiling. You have to hook it with a pole and tug pretty hard before the hatch drops open. It always lets out a stale, dusty smell when you do. My parents used it strictly for storage. Holiday decorations, old photo albums, boxes of things no one wants to throw away, but no one really wants either. I've been up there maybe 4 times in 5 years. The house itself was built in the 1920s. You can hear almost everything. The floors creak loudly enough that I can tell which board someone is stepping on. When it rains, the gutters rattle. In winter, the radiators hiss and knock like someone tapping lightly on the pipes. There's no way someone could move around upstairs without me knowing. At least, that's what I used to think. The first strange thing happened on a Tuesday. Nothing dramatic. I was finishing my nightly check, locking the back door, when I heard a dull thud from above me. Not loud, just solid. I stood there for a second, listening. The house was quiet again. No footsteps, no scraping, nothing. I remember actually rolling my eyes at myself. Old house, wood expands and contracts. Maybe something shifted in the attic. A box tipping over, even. I didn't go up to check. It was late, and I had work early the next morning. The second time was harder to ignore. It was 3 nights later. Same routine, same cup of tea. I just turned off the downstairs lights when I heard it again. Thud. Then a slow dragging sound. It was faint but deliberate, like something being pulled across wood. I froze in the living room, staring up at the ceiling as if I could see through it. My first thought was raccoons. We get them around here sometimes. They're heavier than squirrels. That would explain the weight of the sound. Except, I didn't hear any scurrying, no scrambling claws, just that one heavy movement, then silence. I waited a full minute before I moved. When I finally went upstairs, I didn't pull the attic ladder down. I just stood in the hallway, staring up at the closed hatch. Everything was still. I went to bed telling myself I'd call pest control in the morning. But I didn't, because the next day, there was no evidence of anything. No droppings, no scratching in the walls, no more noise during the day. It felt stupid to make a big deal over 2 sounds. About a week passed before it happened again. This time, it was around 2 a.m. I woke up to a sharp bang directly above my bedroom. It was so sudden and forceful that I bolted upright in bed before I was even fully conscious. My heart was racing, and for a few seconds I genuinely didn't know where I was. Then I heard it. A slow, deliberate shuffle. Not frantic, not animal-like. Measured. Back and forth, right over my head. Every instinct in me said not to move, to stay in bed and pretend I hadn't heard it. But that's not how I am. Once I'm awake, I'm awake. I got up and stepped into the hallway. The house was dark, except for the small nightlight by the bathroom. The attic hatch was directly above me. I could still hear it. A faint scrape, then a pause, then another. I told myself it had to be an animal. It had to be. There was no other reasonable explanation. My hands were shaking as I grabbed the hook pole from the closet. I stood under the hatch for a long time before I reached up and pulled. The door resisted at first, then dropped open with a dry, cracking sound. The ladder unfolded heavily. The smell hit me immediately. Not rotten. Not exactly. Just different. Staler than usual. Like the air had been disturbed. I turned on my phone flashlight and started climbing. Every rung creaked under my weight. My breathing sounded too loud in my own ears. I kept imagining something standing just beyond the edge of the opening, waiting. When my head cleared the floor of the attic, I paused. The beam of my flashlight swept across boxes. Old suitcases. A folded card table. Everything looked normal. Too normal. I climbed the rest of the way up, and that's when I noticed the insulation. It had been pushed aside in a long strip across the center of the attic floor, like someone had dragged something heavy through it. The pink fiberglass was flattened in a path about 2 feet wide. It led from one end of the attic to the other. My first thought was that an animal had nested there. Then I saw the beams. There were long gouges in the wood, deep enough to expose lighter wood beneath the dust. Parallel lines, clustered in groups, carved into the support beams. They were fresh. I could tell by the color. I knelt down, touching one carefully. The wood felt raw. That's when I heard it again, directly behind me. A slow shift of weight. Not from the floor, from above. There's a crawl space above the main attic area, just a narrow gap between the rafters and the roof. Too small for a person to stand in, but big enough to move through if you crawled. The sound came from there. A soft, deliberate pressure, like knees or hands adjusting. I don't remember deciding to move. I just found myself scrambling backward toward the ladder, a flashlight beam shaking wildly across the ceiling. "Hello," I said, which in hindsight was ridiculous. The movement stopped. Total silence. I stood there for what felt like 10 minutes, staring up into the dark space between the beams. Nothing else happened. Eventually, I climbed down. Slowly, quietly. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. The next morning, I called the police. 2 officers came out. I felt embarrassed explaining it. "Probably raccoons," I kept saying, trying to downplay it myself. They went up together. I stayed downstairs. When they came back down, they looked confused. They said they didn't see any animals. No droppings, no nests, no entry points on the roof, no broken vents. They did notice the insulation trail and the scratches. One of them asked if I'd been moving furniture up there. I laughed. It sounded wrong. They suggested maybe an animal had gotten in temporarily and then left, or that the house was settling in strange ways. I didn't argue. What was I supposed to say? That something had been crawling above me? They left after about 20 minutes. For a while, nothing happened. 2 quiet weeks. I almost convinced myself I'd exaggerated it in my head. Sleep deprivation does weird things. Anxiety can make sounds feel intentional. Then last night, I broke my own rule. I skipped my door-checking routine. I don't know why. I was tired. I went straight to bed. Around 3 a.m., I woke up with the unmistakable feeling that someone was standing in my room. It's hard to explain. There was no sound, just awareness. I opened my eyes slowly. The room was dark, except for faint moonlight through the blinds. My bedroom door was open. I always close it, always. I stared at the doorway for a long time, waiting for my eyes to adjust. No silhouette, no movement, just the hallway beyond. Then I noticed something else. The attic hatch was open. I couldn't see it directly from my bed, but I could see the edge of the ladder extending down into the hallway. I know I closed it after the police left. I know I did. I lay there for what felt like hours. Nothing moved. No sound came from upstairs. Eventually, I got up. Each step into the hallway felt like wading into deep water. Heavy, slow. The ladder was fully extended. The attic door hung open. I didn't call out this time. I didn't grab a weapon. I just stood there, looking up into the dark opening. And that's when I saw it. At the very edge of the hatch, carved into the wood framing, were 4 deep lines. Parallel, fresh. I didn't go up. I still haven't. I closed the ladder, locked it with a makeshift latch I installed this morning. I'm looking into getting the whole thing sealed off permanently. There haven't been any more noises today, but I skipped my nightly routine again tonight because I realized something. If whatever made those marks needed the attic hatch open, it didn't need the front door. That was quite a chilling read.